Hello and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. Wisdom of the Ancients, language of the ancients, Chris. So there's this thing, right? It's called hieroglyphics or some such pictographic language, right? Many people think they can read it. Some even think they can pronounce it audibly, right? Are they able to do that or not? What's your take on modern, ancient Egyptian? Let's just start there.
My issue is unlike Hebrew, which actually has living descendants that speak this version of the archaic, as opposed to the mix of languages that go on in Egyptian, in modern day Egypt, that are very, very different to kind of hieratic or the hieroglyphics. I just feel like there's some pretty big assumptions made, shall we say. And bearing in mind it was a French man that did the decoding, I'm not sure how I feel about it.
What, you mean the French cannot be trusted?
I think they shouldn't be.
That's just prejudice. What do you mean by there not being any living descendants? Because when I went to Cairo, I went to the Great Pyramid. I went in the Great Pyramid and I came out of the Great Pyramid and a man ran up to me and he said, "You want by pyramid? You want by pyramid?" And he had. I will just go and get it, Chris, because it's just here.
What, you bought it?
He had this. A pyramid carved out of granite, right? Do you mean to tell me that that man was not descended from the ancient Egyptians? Because he was having me on, in which case.
I didn't say there were no descendants. I just meant the language that is spoken in Egypt, or the many languages, shall we say, that are spoken in Egypt, because it's a very multicultural space. They're not people who actually can read ancient hieroglyphics, because if that was the case, we wouldn't have needed Champollion and the other ones that were going on about it at the time to decode said hieroglyphics, because they'd just ask somebody to read it, wouldn't they? So it was one of those, they've pulled it together. We wouldn't have required the bloody Rosetta Stone, would we, in an attempt to actually understand what the language was? So I'm not saying there are no modern Egyptians. There are definitely modern Egyptians. What I'm saying is the language that they speak is very different to the one that is painted on walls, mainly because it's a ceremonial magical practice that has been somewhat lost to pardon the pun, the sands of time.
Now, I want to do something special, right? Because there's this thing in podcasting and media and such called continuity. Now, obviously, no one can see, apart from you, Chris, my special little pyramid. So what I'm going to do for those nerds, no holds barred nerds out there, I'm going to place this pyramid, you can see me do this, on the side of the Cunning Man's cabinet there. And we've got to do Feisty Witches later today. We've got to do Feisty Witches Season 2, something about a witch's power level. I believe it's episode 4. Now, if you want to see the pyramid that I got from Egypt after I'd been to the Great Pyramid by some man, then you can look in the Feisty Witches show, because it will be on the cabinet. Brilliant, isn't it? Continuity, Chris, because now people can go back and look at it, because they will have probably seen Feisty Witches, because that's live and this is coming out after Feisty Witches, even though it's being recorded before. It's the miracle of modern technology, Chris. It really is. So those that want to see my pyramid, you can go and watch the Feisty Witches show on the Thoth TV presumably is not going to get thrown off of Thoth TV again.
Well, it depends if you're going to behave yourself, doesn't it, Liam?
Just in case, you better go to the Facebook groups, either the Witchcraft Live Facebook group or the No Holds Barred Witchcraft Facebook group. So, with hieroglyphics and more complicated fancy Uber languages, I like to call them Uber languages because they're uber complicated and symbolic and special and magical, right? There's your sort of language that needs to convey a very clear and precise point that cannot be misconstrued, because that would be bad. Those sorts of languages, numbers, maths, all that sort of thing, are really good for really important things that you need to make sure that there's, you know, no getting away with. Okay, so things such as accounts are really, really good for that sort of thing. So you want to make sure that all of your accounts all tally up and that anyone reading those accounts isn't going to be saying, well, I thought that that bird meant something else because it looks so similar to the other one, right? So with the ideas of bookkeeping, official records that are super important, or maybe when you want to convey a clear and precise, simple message, then clear and precise, simple forms of language work best. However, when
Like
you're
uniform.
trying to convey, yes, uniform's a brilliant one. I was going to say binary, Chris, but most people don't speak binary. I'm a robot, therefore I speak binary.
Beep, boop, beep.
Yeah. But conveying something super complicated that's multi-layered is great when it comes to magical practice, occultism, and secret societies and like, because what you have is you have levels of understanding that are all within one specific language. So if we had, for example, a stela, so hieroglyphics, and we gave it to someone that's just starting out, trying to learn a little bit of hieroglyphics or something like that, they might come up with a basic interpretation of that. Does that mean that that is the only interpretation? No. What there could potentially be is hidden layers beneath. This is what I like about the really ancient forms of, language and stuff. I mean, there's some things that are super simple, like symbols, but they convey such a huge amount of different concepts, ideas, and are even actually, Chris, not necessarily languages at all. They're more like gates or doors with, I don't know, WC written on or something like that. Now, WC stands for water closet, but you wouldn't know that necessarily unless you knew what that symbol was in the context of the situation you're in. An alien
And
might
bearing in
find
mind,
it and think, WC, what is that?
with that one, it's one that's actually then carried across, because, you know, modern plumbing was a big thing we were really into. That's then transferred across. So, you know, even in France, like, you know, they will still say WC, like, you know, it's still there. It's become a universal symbol for toilet, even though the words actually mean water closet. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the lady with the triangle for a bottom.
She's wearing a dress, Liam.
Is that what that's supposed to be? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Girls wear dresses, Liam.
Oh, not all girls wear dresses, Chris. I know some boys that wear dresses.
So, yes, but they're not real boys, they're girls.
Chris, now we're getting into political realms that we need to stay away from, right?
I'm teasing, just because you can't resist to say something, you know, politically incorrect if I start you. But no, they kind of, I like language. Language fascinates me. And I mean even basic kind of I can't even speak now. That's
clicks
great
and
for
whistles.
Language one. No, colloquialism.
R2D2 language. Do you speak astromech?
Like, I like the fact that in the little country that we're in, which, let's face it, compared to a lot of other countries, is tiny, that literally you can go 10 miles up the road and someone uses a different word for the word bread roll. Like there are so, it's one I've talked about at work so many times over the years as to what, you'll hold a bread roll up at somebody and you go, what do you call this? Because it's guaranteed to cause a debate, because depending on where everybody's from, they call it something different. So, for some it's a barn or a bap. Obviously around here it's a cob.
Daps, like you put on your feet for PE shoes.
Oh, daps. Those are called pumps, Liam.
Pumps. Oh, honestly, you don't even know nothing about English or nothing, Chris. But yeah, I do agree. England's quite an interesting place. The UK is quite an interesting place because it's been invaded so many times, lots of different cultures and things. But yeah, I agree with you. England's small, but isn't that why we built a conservatory and a dormer on? We put Scotland up there just to add a little bit more room, and then we also extended out, little conservatory on the side to make Wales.
Oh yeah. And then went and collected and annexed all sorts of places all over the world. Yeah, is that what we were doing?
Well, there's that shed in the bottom
We
of the
needed
garden
extra
that
closet
we call
space.
Northern Ireland, didn't there? I'm sure we'll have offended some people there, but never mind.
Fine.
That was the point. So, have you got a favourite language? And if you speak so many languages, what language is it that you think in? Because I often ask people that speak multiple languages, what language is it that you actually think in?
I think in English, because that's my first language.
Hmm.
It's not been overtaken by others. My favourite language is a contentious one now.
Is it Russian?
It's Russian.
I thought it was.
But that's just because I like how direct it is. But then it's flowery when it needs to be. We're having an interesting conversation at work the other day about German, the German language.
Right.
And kind of like, if you took the German out of English, because we get a lot of our nouns from Germany, means that kind of like the language itself would stop functioning.
Mm.
Whereas if you were to take the French out of our language, it just removes the floweriness of our language. Like it's all
interesting. Doesn't
it's
that
all the
say
kind
everything you need to know about the EU?
It would take out all the nuance, whereas actually where our kind of sarcasm and our dry sense of humor comes from the kind of Germanic parts of it, the kind of what people would try and call Celtic, I guess. That kind of Germanic side, that kind of Celtic land, when those sorts of languages mix with ours.
So do you think that, because this is a contentious subject, if you want to progress in magic, practical magic, that you should, like many secret societies and witchcraft schools and occult schools and groups and such say, go and learn an ancient dead language. Would you say that that is a very important thing? Because you look at a lot of them and it's like, oh, well, go and learn a bit of Hebrew. Or, oh, no, don't learn all of that stuff. Go and learn German, because all the good books are in German that haven't been translated and all that sort of thing. Are you one of these people that say, look, don't learn any magic yet, don't actually do anything, minus maybe the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram? You could do that for a year. But whilst you're doing that, learn a language. Are you one of those types, Chris?
No, I'm not. To me,
Chris, come on. Talking about bucking the trend, I mean, why not? I mean, that's the go-to, isn't it? Go and learn a dead language, go and waste half a lifetime going and doing stuff like that. Surely that's great importance. There'll be people here that are crying, thinking that they've spent so many years trying to learn words that they don't understand because they're written in the books and that, and their mentor or teacher or whatever person that's higher ranking than they are in the organization of occult black lodge that they're trying to get into, told them they got to go and learn this shit, Chris. And you're saying no.
I'm saying, much like the Egyptians, that a picture says 1,000 words. So why would you learn lots and lots of words that you don't understand and could miss out the nuance on, when you could just follow the pictures in a book? Because let's face it, most people will hide most of their secrets in their drawings.
Yeah.
Their words are just there to kind of, remember milk. It's it's that kind of, you write the bits that you're going to forget. The drawing
Or
is normally where you'll
mislead.
find all the workings out, is normally very well condensed into a beautiful drawing. Look at the pentagram, or the four-sided star of David. Like,
One of my ninth gate, and it's got that weird guy in it, whose name I can never remember. Yeah, I can't remember what his name is. He played Edward Scissorhands and various other things. But anyway, it's about
Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp. That's it, Johnny Depp. It's about a book that the devil supposedly wrote, and it got lost to history. But somehow they kind of copied it down and made several copies of the devil's book, something along the lines of that. And if you get the devil book and you learn it, it's kind of like a grimoire. You can summon the devil and get superpowers and shit like that. But actually, in the book, there's all of these pictographs, pictures and such. Not too dissimilar from tarot cards, when I remember looking at it. But they originally thought all of the books were the same, but they're not. Actually, each of the book contains some pictures that are slightly different. Yeah, I won't spoil the film just in case people want to go away and watch The Ninth Gate. But there are all of the secret information, the important information is in pictographic form, and can you read the picture or can you not read the picture? Interesting. A lot of people do gravitate towards archetypes, archetypal symbolism. I think that's one of the reasons why people love and get on so well with tarot, because it's got a lot of archetypes and stuff that you can really gravitate towards and see, represented in your everyday life, no matter what background you're from, or even potentially really century that you're in. With other kind of what I suppose you could say languages, runes and that kind of thing are very much a case of, to me, it's a case of, well, no, we're not even going to pretend to give you some information. You either know what I am or you're not. You either know what I am or you don't. Whereas with tarot, it's like, am I this? Am I that? I can't be. Sometimes I'm this. Sometimes I'm that. I'm all dressed up. I'm gilded this time. Whereas some other languages and forms that link to energies and such are very much a case of, no, you're not worthy. No, you don't. I don't like you. You're not learning my secrets. So that's an interesting point that I don't see discussed. Maybe we should go into that.
I was going to say, not that we talk about tools a lot. I guess that kind of is a good little tangent to go on.
What are you talking about? We're always talking about tools. We're bitching about half of the YouTubers and authors and that they're out there. They're all tools.
You finished being rude.
Yeah.
So save it for Fausty, Liam. Save it for Fausty.
Okay.
With the you've made me lose my train of thought. Tools. So with tarot, there is kind of like, there are layers to it. So to a certain extent, it's kind of like you're dealing with the classical Sphinx. It's a series of questions. If you can answer the questions, you can get to the next layer of information. It's all hidden in symbols and nuance. Whereas, like you say, with the runes, it's a case of you're tapping into something, and if you can't get there or you don't have the password, you're not going to get to the levels that you want to get to in order to make runes useful. And I think, like with dead languages, because there's so little about them written down, people have got too much room for making up their own shit. So, it's become this kind of watered down story, almost like with the hieroglyphics of, they're just pictures. and you just kind of like, you just need to decode, oh, like, you know, that one, it's got a birdie on it that looks a bit like a raven. Oh, it must be the R. Like, you know, it gets watered down into this kind of broken idea of it being an alphabet. Everyone focuses on this alphabet part of it. And with runes, that's exactly what happens. Is people go, oh, well, it's a language, it's a written language, it means this. And kind of they go to that kind of their understanding of Egyptian hieroglyphs and kind of give it, go, oh, well, you know, yes, it's a letter, but it's also got a meaning. Here's a couple of words that it's associated with. And it becomes that kind of word association game rather than what it should be, which is, you know, a ceremonial language. Combined in certain ways, these things will do shit. And that's the kind of the whole point, is they're combined together as concepts in order to do some funky metaphysical shit, which won't happen if you don't have an understanding and you're not given access. You know, to kind of jump back and forth between the two. You know, I think part of it with the runes is they focus on what bits they have got written down, which, you know, are the, you know, the Eddas, for example, or whatever, when they and they're talking about, you know, Odin having to sacrifice his eye in order to get access to them, suggests that they predate him. So, and no one ever pays attention to the fact, well, they clearly predate him, yet you seem to keep calling him Master of the Runes. And your information that you've got is post Odin, at which point you kind of go in, do you really have a hope in hell of understanding what he's talking, you know, what his version, his understanding of? And the same's kind of happened to tarot, hasn't it? Where we've got the kind of post Golden Dawn version. You know, tarot for me now describes a methodology as opposed to a language. And depending on who you're taught by or what methodology of tarot you've actually kind of tapped into will depend on what version or how accurate you can be. And we often talk about kind of, you know, when you get people interested in the Egyptian mysteries, which we kind of avoid as often as we possibly can, don't we, Liam? Because people have got too much of a stain of the what do you call him, the Wiccan Messiah, has kind of tainted the concept with the help
all
of
the
people like
wannabes
Robert
gravitate
Gray.
towards Egypt, Chris. Throughout history, all of the wannabes, wannabe magical, they all gravitate towards Egypt to try and find its mistress and such. And very often they don't. You have to be in it to win it, which basically means you have to be there at the time. But there we go. I won't expand on that. Certainly not on this side of the watershed. We'll have to wait until the Patreon to go into such sordid details of certain people's pasts and such. But there we go. We've probably got about 5 more minutes before we swap over. This is the free edition of the Narrows Bar Witchcraft podcast, and we make you pay for the next bit where we discuss like the actual useful magical information, because we ain't going to give that away for free, are we? So what would you like to discuss? Because I thought of a lot of the time you've talked about alphabets. I say, okay, interesting. Alphabet kind of, you're talking specifically language, reading it and it telling you some information. Like we read a book, a recipe book gives you recipes for how you make food, yeah? Cookbook. But what if, and I know this is a scary thought, what if it's not so much that these things are languages to convey information to you by telling you, because that's how our language is based, that's how we learn, and we're too used to it. What if they're actually circuits? So what if the spell or the magical operation is actually that language? Because when we go from into engineering, particularly things like electrical engineering, pneumatical systems, that kind of thing, we've got all of these different symbols all of a sudden, but they all mean something, but putting in different orders, making different circuits, including them all together, make some big diagram, big circuit diagram, or a wiring diagram, or something like that. Now, that's not necessarily telling you a story, is it? Or is it? I mean, if you understand how circuits work, you understand electricity, or you understand how air works in pneumatic systems, it is telling you a story. But that story, remember, is not the story of necessarily go away and copy this. What it actually is that when you go through this door or you take this panel off, this is what you're going to find. And I'm not seeing a lot of people approaching hieroglyphics carved on sarcophagus, coffins, temple walls, anything like this as people are reading it as oh look, here's a story, here's a nice story, like when you go down to I don't know, the shopping centre or something like that, and it says, oh, hello and welcome to Cabot Circus, this is where you'll find this shop's the food court's that way. I'm not seeing that. What I'm actually seeing more is wiring diagrams, and this is how this system works, you see, because on a physical level and on a multi-dimensional level, we need to separate things out at multiple levels. Now, on a physical level, if you're wanting lots of magical things going on multiple other levels, you might be tying that with an anchor to the physical world. Does that mean you need to construct some kind of three-dimensional object for that? Or can you simply just carve the diagram? Can you carve the symbol? Can you carve that anchor into something? Can you draw it down on a piece of paper? This is what I'm not seeing. I'm seeing, and some people get confused with sigil magic and stuff like that, saying, "Well, I can't tap into that, or I don't like it," and yet they'll go away and they'll do a spell that involves candles and ceremonies and stuff like that. And you're kind of thinking, well, you're doing the physical stuff, but you don't have to do that physical stuff. Just if you're trying to tie it to the physical world, doing a little bit down here and a little bit elsewhere, that's fine. But technically, you could just write it down, or you could just draw it, or you could do all sorts of things to tie it to the physical world, to do the physical parts. But people don't necessarily think that. When I see, oh, look, here's some hieroglyphics, temple wall, people will think hieroglyphics on a temple wall. I think, oh, door. Look, there's a door there. I'll go through that. Can't step through it in the physical plane, but I sure as shit can in the astral plane. But there we go. You got 2 or 3 minutes. Do you agree, disagree? Or have I gone too far, Chris?
I don't think you've gone too far. I think people need to think more about why do we write things down? And in what context are we putting them down? Because when it comes to something like religious writing on a wall, that's not simply a shopping list. You're talking about someone has gone into the extent of actually carving this into stone. So obviously, if you look at the archaeological world, they will automatically go to, oh, they carved it into the wall, it must be something to do with ritual, because that's their go-to. That's their understanding is, oh, well, it must be ritualistic, it must be religious, it must be something to do with their belief system. Whereas actually, these a lot of what we're talking about there are tombs. So what are you needing in a tomb when you put the context of eternal life on top of that? Or at least that's what they assume, based on the fact that Egyptology started with the Victorians. So they were all about let's get eternal life. So the assumption, therefore, is that all these tombs must have something to do with getting to heaven, or the Egyptians' barbaric version of heaven. And therefore you're then applying that context. At that point, you should then know what is required. Either everything in that space is there as, like Liam says, part of the machine in order to get you to paradise, or it's something different. Has that person got to remember something?
And that's it for this edition of the No Horsepower Witchcraft podcast. When is a tomb not a tomb? Well, to find out the answer, you'll have to join the Thoth Witchcraft Patreon. Go and do it now. Come on, I know you want to.